Lieutenant Commander Jake Mitchell checked his watch as the helicopter's rotors slowed to a stop. The dusty Afghan landscape stretched endlessly before his 8-man SEAL team, broken only by rocky outcroppings and scattered villages. Intelligence had been tracking a high-value target in this region for weeks, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces. The mission seemed straightforward enough. Get in, gather intelligence, and get out. Mitchell had led dozens of similar operations, but something felt different about this one. Maybe it was the way the intelligence officer had avoided eye contact during the briefing, or how quickly they'd been rushed into deployment. Petty Officer First Class Tommy Rodriguez adjusted his gear and fell into formation behind Mitchell. At 28, Rodriguez had seen enough combat to trust his instincts. And right now, they were screaming that something wasn't right. The landscape was too quiet, too empty for a region supposedly crawling with enemy activity. The team moved in tactical formation across the barren terrain, their boots crunching softly on the gravelly ground. Sergeant Marcus Thompson, the team's communications specialist, periodically checked in with base command. Each time, he received the same response. Continue mission as planned. As they approached the target village, Mitchell raised his fist, signaling the team to halt. Through his binoculars, he surveyed the collection of mud brick buildings clustered around a dried riverbed. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, and he could make out figures moving between the structures. It looked like any other rural Afghan village. "Something's off," whispered Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, the team's intelligence analyst. She'd been studying satellite imagery of the area for days. There should be more activity. The intelligence suggested this place was a major staging area. Mitchell nodded grimly. The village appeared almost too normal, too peaceful. In his experience, when things looked this calm, it usually meant trouble was brewing just beneath the surface. The team established an observation post on a low ridge overlooking the village. For hours, they watched and waited, documenting the comings and goings of villagers. Children played in the dusty streets while women carried water from the well. It all seemed incredibly ordinary. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Thompson received an encrypted message from command. His expression darkened as he read the contents. "Sir," he said quietly to Mitchell, "we've got a problem. Intelligence has been compromised. The target knows we're here." Before Mitchell could respond, the crack of a sniper's rifle echoed across the valley. Chunks of rock exploded near Rodriguez's position as the team scrambled for cover behind the ridgeline. "Contact! Contact!" Mitchell shouted into his radio. "We're taking fire from multiple positions." The peaceful village had transformed into a deadly trap. Muzzle flashes erupted from windows and rooftops as enemy fighters revealed their positions. The SEALs had walked straight into an ambush. Corpsman Second Class David Kim immediately began scanning for injuries, while the rest of the team returned fire. The enemy had chosen their positions well, with clear fields of fire and excellent cover. The SEALs were pinned down on the ridge, with nowhere to retreat. "Thompson, get on the horn," Mitchell ordered. "We need immediate extraction and air support." Thompson keyed his radio. But the response that came back made his blood run cold. Negative on immediate extraction. Nearest air support is 40 minutes out. Weather's closing in fast. As if to emphasize the point, dark clouds began rolling across the desert sky. The wind picked up, sending dust and debris swirling around their position. A sandstorm was approaching, which would ground any aircraft in the area. Rodriguez crawled over to Mitchell's position, keeping low as bullets whistled overhead. "Sir, we've got movement on 3 sides. They're trying to flank us." Mitchell assessed their situation quickly. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped on a ridge with limited cover. The approaching storm would eliminate any chance of air support for hours. They needed a miracle. "Vasquez, what's our ammunition status?" Mitchell called out. "Running low, sir." "At this rate, we'll be dry in 20 minutes. The Taliban fighters below seemed to sense the SEALs' predicament. Their fire intensified, and Mitchell could see groups of fighters moving to surround their position. The trap was closing. Kim suddenly called out. "We've got wounded." Petty Officer Jackson took one in the shoulder. Mitchell's mind raced through their options. They could try to break through the enemy lines, but that would be suicide with a wounded man. They could try to hold their position, but they were rapidly running out of ammunition. Their only real choice was to call for help and hope someone could reach them before it was too late. "Thompson, send out a general distress signal," Mitchell ordered. "Full SOS broadcast. Someone out there has to be listening." As Thompson began transmitting their desperate plea for assistance, the enemy fire continued to intensify. The SEALs were running out of time, ammunition, and options. The approaching sandstorm would soon envelope their position, making any rescue attempt nearly impossible. In the growing darkness, with the sound of enemy voices getting closer, the small band of warriors prepared to make their last stand in the unforgiving Afghan desert. Thompson's radio crackled with static as he broadcast their distress signal across all frequencies. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Bravo 6. 8-man team pinned down. Coordinates 34.5892 north, 69.1743 east. Taking heavy fire. 1 wounded. Request immediate assistance." The only response was silence and the whistle of bullets overhead. Mitchell watched the Taliban fighters advancing up the ridge through his night vision scope. They moved with confidence, knowing the Americans were trapped. The sandstorm's leading edge had arrived, reducing visibility to mere yards and making the air thick and choking. "Sir, there may be 200 meters out and closing fast," Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with concern. He'd been counting muzzle flashes and estimating enemy positions. "I count at least 30 fighters, maybe more." Jackson gritted his teeth as Kim worked on his shoulder wound. The bullet had passed through cleanly, but he was losing blood and wouldn't be much help in a firefight. Every shot the team fired now had to count. Suddenly, Thompson's radio came alive with an unexpected transmission. The voice was calm, steady, with a slight southern drawl. "Bravo 6, this is Overwatch. I have eyes on your position. Hold tight." Mitchell grabbed the radio. "Overwatch. Identify yourself. What's your unit?" A pause. "Let's just say I'm a friend. I've been monitoring your situation. The bad guys are about to have a very bad day." "Read it." Before Mitchell could respond, the crack of a high-powered rifle echoed through the storm. One of the advancing Taliban fighters suddenly dropped, his weapon clattering on the rocks. The other fighters immediately took cover, confused and scanning for the source of the shot. "1 down," came the calm voice over the radio. 11 more spotted moving up your eastern approach." Another shot rang out. Then another. 2 more enemy fighters fell, and the advance up the ridge ground to a halt as the remaining Taliban fighters sought whatever cover they could find. "Who the hell is that?" Rodriguez whispered to Mitchell. "I don't know, but he's buying us time," Mitchell replied, watching through his scope as the mysterious Marksman continued to engage targets with surgical precision. The unknown sniper's position wasn't visible to the SEALs, but his shots came from somewhere high and to the west. Each round found its mark with deadly accuracy, and the Taliban fighters were beginning to panic. Thompson continued broadcasting on all frequencies, trying to reach any friendly forces in the area. Finally, a response came through. "Bravo 6, this is Falcon Base. We have your position. Emergency extraction team is en route, but the storm has grounded all aircraft. Estimated arrival time is 3 hours. 3 hours. Mitchell knew they didn't have 3 hours. Even with their mysterious guardian angel picking off enemy fighters, there were too many of them. Eventually, sheer numbers would overwhelm their position. "Overwatch, what's your ammunition status?" Mitchell asked, into the radio. "I'm good for a while," came the reply. "But you've got more company coming. Vehicles approaching from the south. Looks like reinforcements." Through a brief gap in the swirling sand, Mitchell could make out headlights in the distance. At least 3 vehicles, possibly carrying 20 or more additional fighters. The situation was going from bad to worse. Kim finished bandaging Jackson's wound and crawled over to Mitchell. "Sir, we need to move. Jackson can travel, but he's weak. If we stay here much longer, we're not making it out." The mysterious Marksman's voice came over the radio again. "Bravo 6. I've got a suggestion. There's a dried creek bed about 400 meters north of your position. It leads to a series of caves that should provide better cover. The Taliban don't know about it. Mitchell studied his map through his night vision goggles. The creek bed wasn't marked, but it made sense. Flash floods would have carved channels through this terrain over thousands of years. How do you know about these caves? Mitchell asked. Let's just say I've been in this neighborhood a while, Overwatch replied. I can provide covering fire for your movement, but you'll need to move fast. The vehicles will be here in 10 minutes. Vasquez checked her ammunition count and shook her head grimly. We're down to our last few magazines, sir. If we're going to move, it has to be now. Mitchell made the decision. Overwatch. We're moving to the creek bed. Light them up. The hidden marksman's rifle came alive with rapid, precise fire. Taliban fighters scrambled for cover as bullets found their marks with inhuman accuracy. Using the confusion, Mitchell led his team down the backside of the ridge toward the creek bed. Carrying Jackson between them, the SEALs moved as quickly as the terrain and storm conditions allowed. The wind howled around them, providing natural concealment, but making navigation difficult. Sand stung their faces and eyes as they stumbled through the darkness. Almost there, Mitchell called out, as the ground began to slope downward into what had once been a riverbank. Behind them, the sound of gunfire continued as their mysterious benefactor kept the enemy pinned down. Whoever Overwatch was, he had nerves of steel and shooting skills that bordered on supernatural. The creek bed was deeper than expected, carved into the landscape by countless seasonal floods. Rocky overhangs provided natural shelter, and Mitchell could see what looked like cave openings in the far bank. Overwatch, we're in position, Mitchell reported. Good. The vehicles just arrived, and they're not happy about their casualties. I count approximately 40 fighters now, but they're disorganized and scared. They know someone's out there, but they can't find me. As if to prove the point, another rifle shot echoed through the storm, followed by shouts of anger and confusion from the enemy positions. Thompson set up his radio in one of the cave openings and continued trying to reach any coalition forces in the area. The caves provided excellent protection from the storm and enemy fire, but they were also potential traps if the Taliban discovered their location. Sir, Vasquez said quietly to Mitchell, whoever this Overwatch guy is, he's not military, at least not current military. His communications protocols are all wrong, and no unit operates alone like this. Mitchell nodded. He'd been thinking the same thing. The mysterious marksman was clearly highly trained and familiar with the area. But something about him didn't fit standard military procedures. Over the radio, Overwatch's voice continued to provide tactical updates. They're spreading out now, trying to search the ridge systematically. I can slow them down, but eventually, they'll figure out you're not there anymore. The storm was reaching its peak intensity, with winds that made standing difficult and visibility reduced to almost nothing. But it was also their protection. As long as the weather held, enemy reinforcements couldn't arrive by air, and the Taliban fighters would have trouble coordinating their search. Jackson had lost consciousness from blood loss despite Kim's efforts to stabilize him. They needed to get him to proper medical care soon, or they might lose him. Overwatch, Mitchell called into the radio. We've got a man down who needs immediate medical attention. Any chance you know a way out of here? The response came after a long pause. There might be a way, but it's going to require some trust on your part. And it won't be easy. Mitchell's voice was steady despite their desperate situation. Overwatch. We're all ears. Jackson's bleeding out, and we need options. There's an old smuggler's route through the mountain, came the reply. Follows a series of connected caves for about 2 miles. Comes out near a village where you might find transportation. Rodriguez peered deeper into the cave system with his flashlight. The passage seemed to extend far back into the mountain, carved by centuries of water flow and human use. Looks like it goes pretty deep, sir. Ober. The downside, Overwatch continued, is that you'll be underground for most of the journey. No radio contact. And if the Taliban figures out where you went, they could trap you inside. Kim checked Jackson's pulse and looked up grimly. Sir, He's getting weaker. We need to move him now, or we won't be moving him at all. Mitchell weighed their options. Stay and fight with dwindling ammunition against overwhelming odds, or trust a mysterious stranger and venture into unknown cave systems with a wounded man. Neither choice was appealing. Overwatch. How do you know about these caves? A long pause. I used to live in that village. A long time ago, before Mitchell could ask more questions. The sound of approaching voices echoed through the storm. The Taliban fighters had discovered the creek bed and were beginning to search the cave entrances. They're close, Vasquez whispered. Maybe 50 meters in closing. Decision time, Bravo 6. Overwatch's voice crackled through the radio. I can keep them busy for a few more minutes, but then you're on your own. Mitchell made his choice. We take the caves. Thompson, take point with the night vision. Kim and Rodriguez, carry Jackson. Everyone else, watch our 6. The team moved deeper into the cave system, their flashlights creating dancing shadows on the ancient rock walls. Behind them, gunfire erupted as Overwatch engaged the searching Taliban fighters once again. The caves were larger than expected, clearly used for centuries by travelers and smugglers moving through the mountains. The air was cool and dry, a relief after the sandstorm outside, but the darkness seemed to press in around them as they moved deeper underground. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, Thompson held up his hand. Split in the tunnel ahead, sir. 2 directions. 2 directions. Mitchell consulted his compass, trying to maintain their general heading toward the village Overwatch had mentioned. Left passage. Stay close, and keep noise to minimum. As they moved through the cave system, Mitchell couldn't help but wonder about their mysterious guardian. The man's shooting was too precise, his knowledge of the area too detailed, for him to be just another coalition soldier. There was something personal about his involvement in their rescue. The caves proved to be a complex network, with multiple passages branching off in different directions. Ancient markings on the walls suggested they'd been used by travelers for generations. The team made steady progress, but Jackson's condition continued to deteriorate. After nearly 2 hours of underground travel, Thompson spotted light ahead. Looks like an exit, sir. The team emerged from the caves into the pre-dawn darkness, finding themselves on a hillside overlooking a small village. The storm had passed, leaving the air clear and cold. Below them, oil lamps flickered in a few windows, and smoke rose from morning fires. This is it, Mitchell said quietly. Everyone stay alert. We don't know if this village is friendly or hostile. As they approached the outskirts of the village, an elderly Afghan man stepped out of the shadows. He was unarmed but carried himself with quiet dignity. In accented English, he said, "You are the American soldiers. Come, quickly." The man led them to a compound surrounded by high mud walls. Inside, several vehicles waited in a courtyard, and Mitchell could see other figures moving in the shadows. You were expected, the man explained. Medical supplies and transportation have been arranged. Kim immediately began working on Jackson with proper medical equipment that had been laid out for them. The wounded SEAL's color improved almost immediately as IV fluids began replacing his lost blood. Mitchell approached the elderly man. Who arranged this? How did you know we were coming? The man smiled slightly. A friend sent word. He said American warriors would need assistance. We do not forget those who help us. As dawn broke over the mountains, the sound of helicopter rotors echoed in the distance. Thompson's radio crackled to life with a transmission from the extraction team. Bravo 6, this is Falcon Rescue. We have your beacon. Landing in 2 minutes. The rescue helicopter touched down in the village square, kicking up clouds of dust. As the medical team rushed to load Jackson aboard, Mitchell tried one more time to reach their mysterious benefactor. Overwatch, do you copy? This is Bravo 6. After a long moment, the familiar southern drawl came through clearly. Read you loud and clear, Bravo 6. Glad to see you made it out. Who are you? We owe you our lives. Another pause. Name's Daniel Morrison, retired Marine sniper. Been living in these mountains for the past 3 years. Mitchell was stunned. Retired? What are you doing out here? That's a long story for another time. Let's just say sometimes the war doesn't end when you go home. Sometimes, you find a new way to serve. As the helicopter lifted off with Jackson stable and the rest of the team secure, Mitchell stared out at the rugged landscape below. Somewhere in those mountains was a man who had risked his life for strangers, using skills honed in service to his country to save fellow warriors in need. Back at base, Mitchell would file his after-action report, but he would keep certain details to himself. The existence of Daniel Morrison and his one-man war against the Taliban would remain classified, known only to those who had been saved by his intervention. Weeks later, when Jackson had recovered and returned to duty, the team would sometimes speculate about their mysterious guardian. Intelligence reports occasionally mentioned unusually precise Taliban casualties in the region, always attributed to unknown coalition forces. But the SEALs knew the truth. Somewhere in the Afghan mountains, a ghost continued his private war, watching over those who needed protection and answering distress calls that echoed across the wilderness. He had found his purpose in the most unlikely place, using his deadly skills not for revenge or glory, but for the simple act of keeping good men alive. The desert wind would continue to carry SOS signals across the barren landscape. But now the SEALs knew that someone was always listening, ready to answer when heroes needed help. In a war where the lines between friend and enemy were often blurred, Daniel Morrison had chosen his side with absolute clarity. And in the silence that followed gunfire, in the moment between calling for help and receiving it, warriors would find hope in knowing that somewhere out there, a guardian angel watched over them with a sniper's rifle and an unbreakable commitment to bringing his brothers home.